Good morning. My name is Eleanor Davey and I'm an editor at the Humanitarian Advisory Group. I'm here with my colleagues Beth Eggleston and Pip Henty, and we're really pleased to be joining the session today. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on here in Melbourne, lands that were never ceded, and to acknowledge the leadership of First Nations people in the struggle for equality. I'd like to turn now to you both, so you could introduce yourselves. Beth, let's start with you.
Thanks, Eleanor. It's so lovely to be with you today. My name is Beth Eggleston. I'm a co-founder and director here at Humanitarian Advisory Group.
And thanks, Eleanor. My name is Pip Henty. I'm a leader here with Humanitarian Advisory Group, and I lead our research that explores diverse and inclusive humanitarian leadership globally.
Fantastic. So Pip, let's start with you. HAG has been doing research on diversity and humanitarian leadership for a while now. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah. So as part of Humanitarian Advisory Group's multi-year research program, Humanitarian Horizons, we have a large focus exploring humanitarian leadership. And we're really interested in undertaking research to better understand how diverse and inclusive humanitarian teams can contribute to tackling some of the challenges in the sector. And we're really interested in understanding how diverse and inclusive leadership teams can actually contribute to better outcomes for the sector. We know that from other sectors, such as the private sector, that diverse teams are widely understood to generate a variety of positive outcomes from decision-making to risk management. And that's what our research explores. We're currently working with local experts across Bangladesh and the Philippines. A shout out to Pam, Sita and Suman, who are really leading the research with us currently. And we're really excited to be publishing the findings of this research program later on in the year.
Fantastic, thank you. And Beth, can you tell us about some of the interesting findings so far?
Yeah, great. Well, Humanitarian Advisory Group is a progressive social enterprise, and we're really passionate and committed about better understanding what diversity and inclusion looks like in the humanitarian sector. And we're also really passionate about walking the talk ourselves in the way that we run our organisation and the way in which we do our research. So in 2019, we carried out a major global survey. More than 1,500 humanitarian workers responded to this survey in more than 115 countries. So some of the interesting statistics that came out of that, one of them was that women are overrepresented in the lower levels of humanitarian organisations. So at the entry level, about 78% of those positions are filled by women. And then when we look at the senior and executive levels, we see that women are underrepresented. So that's going down to about 43%. And this is actually really exacerbated when we look at field positions where you're in a high risk or conflict setting where women are they're even fewer in those leadership positions. And what's interesting about this research is it goes beyond gender as well. So we looked also at people living with disability, and only 4% of survey respondents were people living with a disability. And yet we know globally that really is about 10 to 15% of the population. We also looked at socioeconomic issues and a whole range of different issues that that go beyond the usual ones you may think of when you're thinking about people sitting around management tables and boardrooms. And we really hope that that's going to bring a strength to how humanitarian responses are led and how you can have those different perspectives around the table.
Great. And so recently, Pip, HAG has been doing some work in partnership with the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And what has that research found?
Yeah, so we're really lucky to be able to partner with ICRC, IFRC and the Glow Red Network to understand how diverse leadership teams shaped responses to COVID-19 within the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And this was such an exciting piece for us. And it really showed that the evidence is mounting. Different leaders prioritised and approached decision-making differently. And this report will really contribute to the mounting evidence that is being created within our sector that does explore humanitarian leadership, which is really, really exciting. And for me, there was a couple of really standout findings. One of them was that we actually did identify that different identities and experiences actually informed and shaped how different leaders within the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement approached the COVID-19 response. And then kind of sitting under that, there's two key findings that I think will be really relevant to the conversation today. And the first one is looking at how gender influenced how leaders sought and used evidence. So, for example, women were more likely to use internal evidence gathering mechanisms, such as staff surveys, to inform their decision making and responses. They were also more likely to undertake assessments to inform decision making, such as financial assessments, earlier on in their response. Not only that, but men were more likely to gather evidence externally. So, for example, through conversations with people outside the organisation, but also other organisations themselves. The last finding that I think is super interesting is that leaders who identify with ethnic or racial minorities supported diverse communication modalities for issues related to human resources. So they were significantly more likely to implement anonymous feedback mechanisms. And when we explored that further through interviews, it was suggested that was because, potentially because those who have needed those mechanisms in the past or present are then more likely to recognise the importance of them during a crisis. But talking about diversity isn't enough. It's also around inclusion. So having a range of views and perspectives around the table is really important, but it's not enough. It's important that those people are heard and that they feel safe to participate and that they can do so meaningfully. And the research does touch on issues of inclusion, and that's further explored in the report that you can read. But one of the examples that was identified by many interviewees we chatted with was that leaders observed that contributions by men were often taken more seriously, and they were to be considered to be more influential and important. And really this is where that report leaves us with many findings, but also lots of questions and opportunities for further research in this area. And this report really provides a great platform to create more evidence and explore further, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that there's more work to be done, nonetheless, Beth, how do you hope that the sector will be able to use the insights so far?
Well, I think what Pip was saying is so true. It's a very powerful platform, and we hope that this data really will provide a basis for discussion and reflection for leadership teams in the humanitarian sector and perhaps in other sectors as well. We hope that the research will raise awareness, and it will be an opportunity to shift assumptions. I think there's a lot of assumptions that were challenged during the work that Pip was leading, and I think this is a very important part of thinking differently. And also being able to use this research to advocate, to shift to more diverse and inclusive teams, to have some of those difficult conversations and to be able to shift human resource practices and other kind of stereotypes or assumptions that are really out of date. And really we hope that this will demonstrate that there were fewer reasons that organisations are not going to be intentional about having more perspectives around the table. There's really no excuse, and now we have the evidence to back that up.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for sharing these insights. Thank you all for allowing us to join you remotely. We wish you all the best for the rest of the session, and please do get in touch if you'd like to talk to us more about the research.